Welcome back. Unicoi County Schools has had to cancel classes on several occasions this year, from snow and severe weather even to impacts from Hurricane Helene. Here to explain a little bit about the school system's plans going forward as we are well into the second semester is Superintendent John English. Thanks for joining us this Friday afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Angie.
Well, first off, you and I were just chatting. How many days have students been out in Unicoi County this year?
Well, if you go back to Helene, we missed 15 days there, and then we've missed 13 snow days so far, so we've missed 28 days to this point.
Well, we know that it's not easy making that decision. So what goes into making the call as to whether or not to have school or whether to delay class for a couple hours?
Ultimately, it just comes down to safety of our students and our staff. We have a lot of mountain and side roads that are difficult to travel on a good day, but you throw ice or snow in the mix. And so ultimately, we're going to look at, do we feel like there's risk, for not only the buses, but the young driver, elderly drivers who are taking their grandkids to school. When we look at that, very rarely is that decision made about Main Street in town. It's those side roads and mountain roads and high elevations on both ends of the county.
And we know that there are some days built into the school year, for these situations, whether it be severe weather or snow days. So how many of those did you have built in, and what does that look like now?
We go into every school year with 13 days built into the calendar, and we usually use those by the time winter's, had its say. And so we now, as of Wednesday, have exhausted all 13 of those days. We had asked the state for a waiver for virtual learning. We're not crazy about virtual learning, to be honest with you. It's challenging on both sides, staff side, student side, family side, better than nothing. And so we have 8 virtual days that the state granted us a waiver for that we'll now use for the next 8 events that would close school, and then after that we'll be in makeup mode.
So let's talk a little bit about the impacts of this, because 28 days, that's a long time to not be face-to-face with your students. We know that TCAPs are on the horizon, and even third grade retention law, that's a big topic with parents. What does that look like for you now?
I think for students, they're covered in a couple of ways. We did receive a waiver. Typically, TCAP and end of course can count as part of a student's final grade, so we received a waiver on that. So this year it will only be used if it helps the student, so it can't be damaging. And of course there's been an impact. You can't miss that many days of learning and it not have an impact. I think as far as the district accountability and designations going forward, that's still a discussion. It's not been ironed out. We want to take the test. We don't feel like we should miss the test, because that data and information is really important to us when it comes to even planning for student learning going forward for the following year. But we do feel like there's going to be an impact with as much instruction as we've lost. But for students, I do feel like the state's been very considerate in terms of how that impacts students and how it could affect them going forward.
I know that parents and families, they're on both sides when it comes to the opinion on whether or not to have school. So let's talk about some of those frustrations.
Yeah, I get it when there's frustration. We're frustrated sometimes when we can't get into school, because there's no place we want students to be more so as in a classroom learning. And that's not just about the academic side of things. There's some non-academic needs that we recognize. But what I would say is, unless you've had, and I think I can speak for superintendents all across the region on this, we have to weigh the safety piece first. Days can be made up, but if God forbid anything ever happened, a bus, a student driver, you can't get that back. And so as frustrating as they would be, I also feel like the majority of our families want us to keep their kids safe first and foremost. But as far as the frustrations, again, those days can be made up and will be. Even Helene was a little different for us this year, but on a normal year, we're going to have the same amount of instruction days as every other system in the state, because there's a requirement. It may look different in Unicoi County and some other county systems, because during the winter we may go long gaps and not be able to get in school, but when the year's had its say, we'll have the same amount of instruction time as everyone else.
All right, a lot of great information. Thank you for breaking it down for us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Plenty more news to come here on First at 4. Stick around, we'll be right back.